Hey, hello to everybody, and welcome to Monday Meets. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Sabrina, for joining us. Monday Meets is our opportunity to get to know both folks and both the staff of the Willow and also the programs that they serve. We are broadcasting this on Facebook Live, so if you're joining us on the power of Facebook, thank you so much. You can ask questions. Certainly, we would love to have your questions. We welcome them. I will kind of keep an eye on the questions that come through as we go through the interview, so we'll try to interject them as they come in. But we've also got a few things that Sabrina and I have kind of talking about. So we're going to go through that. And if you have any questions, just feel free to post them in the comments section there. And I am keeping track of that on my phone as we go. So, hi, how are you?
I am good. How are
Good. I'm well. I'm well. Holding up. It's odd. I used to, we didn't actually very work in the same spheres that much pre-COVID. So, but we would see each other over at shelter occasionally. But it's great to see you. And welcome to Monday Meets. Would you like to start by kind of giving us your name and your title?
Yes. So my name is Sabrina, and I work as the Survivor Access Advocate, and it's a program based in shelter. So I'm in shelter a lot right now.
Right. Yeah. So you're over there most of the time primarily.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Great. Well, I'm really excited to kind of talk a little bit more about Survivor Access, and I think one thing that a lot of people may not realize is how that kind of manifests itself in action, how it looks in action at the shelter, and I'm really excited to get to that. But let's kind of talk about your journey up to this point. Like, how did you get into this line of work? How did you come to join the Willow?
Yeah. So it's really funny because I actually went to school initially studying biology, thinking I was wanting to become a physical therapist. And
Okay.
after my first semester, quickly realized it wasn't for me. So I knew I wanted to work with people. I just didn't know how to go about doing it. So I did a lot of volunteer work in school. One of my opportunities that I've had that is actually one of my favorite was volunteering for the Habitat for Humanity, which is basically just a organization geared to provide affordable housing to families. And it was just really cool being able to not only help build these homes, but be able to work alongside those families and, yeah, just interact with them. So, 5 majors later, I stumbled across sociology and I just knew I wanted to go into nonprofit work.
Oh,
And
nice.
when I graduated, I didn't really find any opportunities that stood out to me in Kansas City. So I found the Willow in Lawrence and
All right.
interviewed and um, eventually got to be in the position that I am in today. So
Okay, I have to ask. Five majors later. Do you feel comfortable talking about what those five were? I'm curious how you
yeah,
got there. Yeah. Okay.
so actually before I declared biology, before I started college, I went in as like a Black Studies major, but then I don't know, along the way, I'm really into like basketball and sports, and I wanted to somehow help people with injuries because I got injured a lot and it was not fun when I played
Mm.
basketball. So it was Black Studies, biology, computer science. um, and then I thought I wanted to be a math teacher. Pre-calc killed me, so yeah. And then I actually went undecided. So that's the thing you can actually do. And I declared
Right.
undecided. And then after taking a bunch of anthropology classes and sociology classes, I eventually just picked sociology. So
All right, all right. Well, I love it. They're all, it's a very, very disparate mix, but they all have some element of wanting to help people in there.
Right.
So that's kind of been the underlying thread. But what a journey.
So you never
So
think it, but yeah.
so you kind of came from a background of wanting to having some volunteer experience in social services, wanting to be involved in social services, but not necessarily knowing domestic violence issue or being involved with domestic violence issues. This was kind of a different angle that or a different subject that you've been working
Right.
on previously. Okay.
Right. So I took a class in college and I knew a little bit about DV, but I grew up in Wyandotte County and
Uh,
resources there are just scarce and not all of that. I don't want to say not all of that, but there wasn't as much outreach that I've
mm,
noticed that the Willow does, like going into like high schools and talking about DV and all that. There wasn't much of that, and
mm.
it just wasn't talked about often. So I was very interested to see what it was all about. So yeah, I'm glad I stuck with it and I'm here.
Awesome. Well, great, great. So how much then of a learning curve would you say there was? Because for me, not coming, I came from kind of a theater background and a communications background, and I had done a lot of social media, so I had that kind of that experience. But I knew next to nothing about domestic violence. I mean, was it kind of similar? Did you feel like it was similar for you, and that there was a pretty steep learning curve once you got started?
Yeah, there was. I mean, I did not really know that, to be honest, I didn't really know that DV was more than just physical violence. So just learning
Mm,
that it's verbal, it's financial, there's financial abuse and really mental abuse, all of that. And yeah, and I used to run the support group and I was still learning about different things, to talk
yeah.
about, learning alongside with the survivors I was giving extra support to during those groups. So I feel like I've definitely am more knowledgeable and am
Right.
of the subject and of DB and human trafficking since working here.
Yeah, I think it's always one of those really interesting things because we get so involved in it and know so much about it that sometimes it's very easy to forget that a lot of people don't have any knowledge about it whatsoever. And so I think
Right.
that's always a fascinating balance when you're talking to people and when you're doing outreach is to like, okay, where are we at? How much do you know? How much do you kind of
Yeah.
need to and want to know? Which kind of plays in, I think, a little bit with the survivor access position, right? I mean, that's sort of part of what you do, right?
Right. So yeah, working with accessibility and um, uh, having everyone having the opportunity to get this information if it's equally like everyone equally has that opportunity as well as is everyone able to benefit from programs like that. So yeah, a lot of that. And if we are even um, getting enough information out to like our rural areas to those populations know what DV is and all that. So yeah, it does play a part, but yeah.
So if you had to kind of define survivor access, how would you? What would be your kind of elevator pitch? Sort of, this is what survivor access is, and this is what it means.
What survivor access is, I would say is I'm not good at elevator.
That's all right. That's all right. We got time. We got time.
I would say that I mostly strive to make sure everyone is comfortable during their experience at shelters. So, does everyone have like the basic needs needed to be successful here or at shelter rather? Whether that's like if we're meeting dietary needs or if we have enough ethnic care products. And it's also like working with staff to see if once we do have like group living issues in the house, are we addressing those problems, such as, because a lot of times they're not a lot of times, but sometimes, racist and homophobic language, unfortunately is said, not always intentionally, but um, just making sure that staff has all the tools they need to have these conversations and just being an extra support during the process. And then um, helping survivors who have experienced this sort of those types of languages in shelter, helping them process that, and just always checking in with them to see basically if they're comfortable or if they need any extra materials to be
So
successful. Yeah.
a lot of times these can be some uncomfortable conversations, I imagine. Do you sort of have when you go into a conversation like that, how do you approach that in a way that that you feel like that makes you the most comfortable having the conversation, and works to help them to make this conversation to make this conversation happen?
Yeah. I try to initially approach it in sort of like an informal way, so that our survivors aren't feeling like, I don't want, I guess, attacked. So just, you have to build a rapport so that they're like comfortable speaking to you and comfortable with you addressing them with the language that was used, but just creating a safe space. So whether that's, maybe we can go outside and talk about it, or let's have coffee and talk about it. That's generally how I initially approach it. And then you just kind of have to dive into it in the most informed way that you can. Just not just be a trauma informed, but still have like that restorative justice factor in it too. It's like, so that the survivor can take accountability, educating them on why something was said was not okay and could be offensive to other survivors, and just moving on and checking in every so often to see if they're still having trouble. Because most times survivors come in to shelter and they've used this sort of language all their life. So just knowing that it's a new thing for them to have to kind of dissect it and see why it's wrong, and not being too, I don't want to say aggressive, but aggressive with it when you're addressing them.
So in this context, because we talked a little bit a few weeks back with Alicia about trauma-informed care, we look at some of those behaviors in terms of name calling and using that language as either something that they have not had any experience using other language, or as adaptive behaviors designed to help them survive. So instead of coming at it with a 3 strikes and you're out, sort of like, you are bad for doing this, you're kind of looking at it more as, let's have a conversation about this. Let's look at why you're talking about it this way, and let's see if we can figure out a better way to talk about it. Is that right?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. I just I think that's it's something that's really it was great to talk to Alicia about it. It's great to talk to you about it and hear how it actually works in the shelter environment, because when we learned it, it was very theoretical, and I was like, I don't know how all this kind of actually plays out in the day-to-day, but it's great to hear that that's sort of how you're using it in shelter. So let's talk about what shelter life is like. I mean, you've explained it a little bit, but as you're there most of the time, what do you kind of see? I know there's not really one day in shelter, because every day is a little. But how would you sort of describe it? Somebody said, "Well, what's a day in shelter like?" What would you answer there?
How I would answer that? I mean, really, I never know what I'm gonna do. Like I have lists of things that I could complete throughout the day, but you never know when you're going in. end up doing a totally different thing that takes um, like up the rest of your day. So I would say really it's just meeting survivors where they're at. Some days you go in and survivors want to work on goals and they want to apply to jobs and put in different applications to various places. And then some days they just want to watch TV. So um, just being there for them, really.
Yeah.
Some days all I do is maybe go on a walk with a survivor, or watch TV with a survivor. And I mean, it's still helpful. I mean, still working on like health goals. So
Yeah.
it's just different every day. There's different, always something to do. The day is busy, stays
Yeah.
busy. Yeah. I love it.
Nice. I can tell. It's awesome. Yeah, I do feel like it's one of those things, like just being there, like to support with
Yeah.
people who have been so isolated. Like
Right.
just your presence is often enough to really help out.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's. You've been here. You've been here for a few years now, and have I think done this wonderful job of establishing this program. But one of the things, I was talking with Alicia again about it. I talked with a few other folks about is the change. That this is an organization that's all pretty much always in change and always in a state of flux, and new developments are kind of constantly happening. What changes would you like to see organizationally, both in your program and sort of in the broader sense of the Willow as an agency as a whole?
Right. So I'll start with changes in my program. So I do a lot of, I give out a lot of information about different things to, the adults in shelter, but I would like to start like providing some informative information to the children that are there. I think that would be nice and helpful. Just having like literature that introduces them to diversity and inclusion, and have that represented, have them learn that. I feel like, or at least introduce it to them, I feel would be important. So maybe getting some books and sitting down and reading with the kiddos every so often.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
Awesome. It sounds good. I like it.
And then organization-wide, I'm actually really excited for the victims advocate position and that partnership with LPD, and having just someone there during the follow-ups when calls are put in, and meeting with survivors initially. I feel like that would be helpful and help alleviate some of that stress that comes with, reaching out to law enforcement about DV. And yeah, I'm really excited for LPD to get those trainings on HT, human trafficking and domestic violence. I think that'll
Yeah.
be, I'm excited to see how that position evolves. Really, yeah.
Absolutely, great. Well, I did want to talk to. So we looked at kind of what changes maybe are very, very positive. But I think it's also important that people know that as an organization we continually face barriers as well to the services we provide or to our individual programs. So what barriers are you kind of facing right now that are difficult with the program?
Barriers, I would say, uh, really some barriers. So when we talk about accessibility on just like in the physical sense, I feel like shelter, it's kind of old facilities, so it's
Right.
hard to make those changes needed for survivors to have that accessibility, and it's expensive too. So
Yeah.
that's a barrier that I run into often when trying to brainstorm around ways we can make just the shelter facility more accessible. And then it can be really challenging to have, again, those conversations around violent language in the house, especially especially the microaggressive language. All of it really, because it can be triggering, and you have to remember not to take everything that is said personally, because like you said in the beginning, some of these survivors they've used this sort of language for a while, and it's kind of hard to break that cycle. So just having those follow-up conversations in the moment can be hard. Sometimes I have to, step back a bit and think about what I said. And even after those conversations, if I feel like they didn't go so smoothly as I thought they would initially, I come home and think, oh, I could have said this or that or that. So just having those conversations and having them be effective, but not to, again, be not to offend anyone or call anyone out.
Right. I can imagine that can be difficult too, because like we've all had those conversations where we didn't think of the right thing to say until about 10 minutes later, and then we're like, I don't know about you, but I'm like beating myself up the rest of the day, saying, I wish I'd have said this and this and this. And when you're having those conversations, kind of more regularly, it must be hard to kind of make sure that you're taking care of yourself and not beating yourself up too much about that stuff, right?
Right.
So do you have a preferred sort of self-care activity or activities that you do that kind of help you unwind from that sort of thing?
Yeah. I love coming home to my cats. I have two. They're awesome, and my girlfriend, just spending time with her. It's awesome. I'm also really into gaming, so if anyone ever wants my gamers tag,
sounds good. We'll throw it in the comments below. What are your games of choice? What do you prefer to play?
I really right now I'm into The Witcher. Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt. Really good. I recently started playing Resident Evil, but I haven't really got the hang of that yet. I just got it. And then NBA 2K20. I love playing that game. That's probably my favorite.
Nice. Well, we will have to we'll have to take the Witcher 3 discussion offline, I think, because it's not entirely Willow related, but I love that game as well. So if you have any other questions for Sabrina and you didn't get a chance to put them in the comments, we haven't really had any, so we'll assume you answered everything we wanted to know. But if you do have any questions, feel free to email us. I'll put both our emails in the comments below, along with Sabrina's gamer tag. And thank you so much for joining us. And I really appreciate everything that you do and that the Survivor Access Program does in sort of making sure our services are accessible for everyone in the shelter, and that we're putting that trauma-informed care into actual use on a regular basis. So thank you, Sabrina. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This is great. I'm glad you're joining us.
Yeah, it's definitely been a really fun sort of series, and looking forward to carrying on. So we'll see everybody next Monday, and thanks so much, Sabrina. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.